This conference will now be recorded.
Exactly. Good afternoon. It's 3 minutes past 1. My name is Frank Berker. I'm leading work package 4 of the SmartAgriHubs project, which is capacity building for digital innovation hub. Today, I'd like to welcome you.
Frank, may I interrupt you? There is noise in the background.
Yeah, could you please mute your microphones?
Thank you for doing that. Yes. So I'll resume my introduction. So it's my honor today to welcome Maurits Butter. He is my colleague at TNO and is for a long time already involved in the digital innovation hub landscape in Europe. This webinar is part of a wider approach. It started off with the needs assessment in the work package, for which we provided a webinar and a report right after summer last year. In last December, we provided a webinar on skills and capacities for SmartAgriHubs that was provided to us by Govert Gijsers. So today, Maurits will give a presentation, and we have also some upcoming webinars for digital innovation hubs about governance for digital innovation hubs, about farmer-centric innovation, and about use of data. Also on the innovation portal of SmartAgriHubs, you will find a lot of content that is of interest and relevance for digital innovation hub development. But now I'd like to give the word to Maurits. Please, Maurits, welcome to do your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. Yes, I'm honored to give this presentation. Although it is always a bit of a problem to give a presentation like this. Let me be frank about that and also be quite clear about that. These presentations are usually for a diverse group of people, and therefore, well, we can go very much in depth, but it's also a problem because you need to keep to the little bit broader picture. And I chose to give this presentation to create a bit of a broader picture. The development of an innovation hub is a huge thing. It has all different kinds of elements, and you should go in depth enormously. But we have about 30 minutes for the presentation, so I choose to just have chosen just to give you a kind of a structured view on how to create a digital innovation hub, what the different steps are, and what kind of backgrounds. So my objective with this presentation is not to go in depth to the nitty-gritty things of creating a digital innovation hub, because I think that would take a day or 2 days or 3 days. But use the 30 minutes just to give you a kind of a structured view, and that's also my objective. I hope that you will leave this presentation with, okay, these are the elements that I need to address, and in this way, so we can start to get to the nitty-gritty things after this presentation. So I am working for TNO. But I'm also the scientific coordinator of the DIHNET project. I hope that you all know what the DIHNET project is about. It's the so-called meta CSA. So we're connecting the different innovation actions and CSAs that are now operating in the Digital Innovation Hub, the European Digital Innovation Hub community. And we hope to connect the different activities a little bit and to enhance, to boost the European Digital Innovation Hub network. But I'm also representing, therefore, the DIHNET project. And of course, I'm working for TNO. So my presentation will have 4 elements. It is just taking the step back to what is a digital innovation hub very quickly. I'm sure that you all know a little bit more about that, but I still want to set the scene, so to say, in order to very quickly then go to what it's all about, the business plan, and then the creation of a digital innovation hub, and then a little bit going into the different steps of its development. And I will finalize my webinar or my presentation with some final remarks. I would welcome very much after the presentation the questions, because I think that's the most important thing, that to make it more concrete. So please write down your questions during the presentation and fire away when I'm ready. So let me start by introducing the innovation chain. And this is the work we've been doing for the Multicats pilot lines project in 2014 already. And it was kind of one of the pillars, the foundations of the thinking about digital innovation hubs. So then in that project, we saw that from the product side, there's the technology readiness levels going through the different phases of a kind of a product, but that there's also the manufacturing readiness level. And the manufacturing readiness level needs to be combined with the development of the manufacturing, needs to be combined with the development of the product, and that leads to actual business-oriented activities. And what we saw is that there wasn't, you could say that there's an innovation chain from invention to laboratory prototyping to pilot production and demonstration, and finally into market expansion. So that kind of things, SMEs are very much faced with dealing with this innovation chain, and they saw that there was a valley of death, the European Commission, and we needed to come up with some ideas how governments could solve that valley of death. But first, the first problem we faced was, what is exactly the valley of death? And we researched that, and we came to the conclusion it is the combination of two elements. The first element is that SMEs face that before they start with the full selling of their product, they are faced with an uncertainty of if the product they were going to develop, if that product will create a kind of a profit. And that uncertainty that will fall down after pilot production. But on the other hand, to get through that pilot production, you need a lot of capital. You need some pilot production equipment, and that was the problem, before you reduce your uncertainty, you need a lot of money to invest for these innovations. And we saw that the valley of death was the combination of those two elements, and that it increases the risk. And we saw that sharing and combining different innovation chains would reduce the risk, the economic risk. And it reduces because of combining of expertise, sharing equipment, integrating networks, etc., etc. And that will lower the cost that you need, and it will lower also the uncertainty, because people tend to know then what will be much more the problem with a specific product if you were dealing with that for a few times already. And that was for us the idea to come up with the concept of digital innovation hubs, or in this project, the Multicat pilot lines project with the shared facilities of pilot production. So that was the core concept, and that was taken up by the Commission to develop the concept of the digital innovation hub, where there's an orchestrator in the middle, but trying to organize the innovation ecosystem with the help of their partners. And I'm sure that you've all seen one of the key defining elements of a digital innovation hub, and that's the the overview of the services. I think within the your project you've been dealing with that a little bit. And yeah, you could say that a digital innovation hub focuses on all those services, but a competence center it downsizes to the more technology-oriented services. Before I go into the different steps to create this animal, I always say animals for animals in the zoo. I would like to introduce to you the more evolutionary thinking about these concepts. So in the 2012, the competence center was the thing to look at, more technology oriented. We scaled that up to a digital innovation hub, also dealing with ecosystem and business orientation. But now we are facing with regional development networks. And of course, the SmartAgriHubs is the pan-European digital innovation networks. So I hope that sets the scene a little bit of what the digital innovation hub is. It is one of the basic founding blocks to the European digital innovation hub community, and hopefully organized and the European collaboration is organized through the SmartAgriHub together with the regions and other entities. So now looking at the digital innovation hub, we see that in the development of a digital innovation hub, there are different phases. So there's the preparation phase, the initiation phase, stabilization, continuous growth, and termination. And that comes along with some different budgets. So in the preparation phase, it's a little bit low key, but it goes towards creating a kind of an entity, a collaboration with all different kind of stakeholders and partners, and then you kick off during the startup to create new business. And after you initiated that, there's a phase of stabilization, after which you've done your job for the first part, and then you need to boost again, you need to renew your focus, and then there's the continuous growth still going on. And after, well, let's say 10, 15, 20 years, it can be terminated also. In this presentation, we will look at the first phase, the preparation phase. So we're looking at exploration, takeoff, and the startup, a startup of the initiative. And that will focus a little bit on the creation of a business plan. That's the first phase. That's what the first phase will look at, the creation of a business plan. Let me be clear about this also. The business plan, it is a kind of a crystallization of a much broader thing. And that's to create the consortium and the activities and the collaboration between the consortium partners to provide the services towards your customers. So the business plan, perhaps the end goal, is a wrong word. It's not an end goal. It's one of the key results, but it's a kind of a metaphor for a bigger thing, and that's the consortium as such, the collaboration. To create this landscape, there's a lot of things that you need to look at and you need to develop. And we developed this overview of a landscape of elements that you need to address to create an innovation hub in a TNO project called Orchestrating Innovation. We made a distinction between building up the hub and building up the community. So building up the hub is about clarifying the mission and strategy. It's about getting access to basic funding, creating a kind of a key partnership with consortium partners, and creating an RDI strategy, etc., etc. So this is more internal to the consortium that you need to all address and to understand how it can be organized. And then there's of course the connection to the community, creating a brand value, ecosystem collaboration, access to market, and communication. These are the different elements that need to be addressed in a business plan, and you need to search for and to investigate together with your partners, your internal partners, but also with your ecosystem partners. We provided this overview just to, as I said in the beginning of the presentation, just to get clarity on the different elements that need to be addressed. If you know that you need to address that, then you can have a more structured approach to develop such a hub. I know that a colleague of mine, Govert Gijsbus, will talk about organization and governance. And I think, Frank, you will address the business model issues also in a later presentation. Dealing with all these elements, understanding what they all are, that will take 5 days or something like that. So this presentation is just about showing you the broader picture. If you then look at the different steps to create the digital innovation hub business, we see 4 different phases in its development. And you can position those different aspects that I have just shown you. These ones, you can position it in these 4 steps. So it's the first step is about exploring the concept. What is the digital innovation hub about? The second one is to get from that vision into a strategy, into a structured approach, how you can set up the business, and then you need to make it operational. So it's nice to have some strategies, but the proof of the pudding is in the eating, and those are dealing with actual actions of the that need to be identified that how you would actually run the digital innovation hub. And then after that, it's about the initiation. I'll go a little bit further into those 4 steps. And what you see in those 4 steps is that there are 4 elements, 4 pillars, so to say, that need to be further evolved. The first one is organizations, the second one service, third one the ecosystems, and the 4th one are finance. And if you look at those 4 evolutions that need to take place, the first one is about having a small task force, but you need to increase that to a full partnership and together with the connection to the ecosystem. The second one is about developing the services that you want to offer to your customers. And usually it starts with having some technologies available that you can offer to services to your customers, but you need to evolve towards being a full-blown orchestrator of the innovation that I earlier talked about. So it's not only about offering the technologies anymore, it's also offering the help for those SMEs, for other customers, how to get involved in getting those technologies into an actual business. And then there's the external part. You start as a close partnership, but you need to be the full the full partner in the regional ecosystem. And well, besides knowing what the regional ecosystem is, you need to also get connected to that. External relations you need to create. And last but not least, it's about creating or getting from high governmental support, because in the beginning it's just a lot of money from the government, but in the end you will need to grow to a kind of a self-sustaining, semi-private, because the experience is that a lot of the government still will have some kind of a funding towards the organization, but then the funding is institutionalized through programs that are existing, where In the beginning, you can have an initial grant from the government to create your innovation hub. So those 4 elements need to be further addressed during those 3 or 4 steps in the development of your innovation hub. Now a little bit more detailed in the 3 steps, the 3 light blue steps of the development of the innovation hub. The first step that needs to be made is that you have very much clear what the mission and the strategy of the Digital Innovation Hub is. This is about having workshops with your customers, workshops with your key partners, but it's still quite open. It's exploratory. The first key partners will be coming to the Digital Innovation Hub as the initial core partners, so to say. So perhaps the godfathers of the Digital Innovation Hubs. You need a small number of partners there to make steps. And then you need to look at the ecosystem and find out what other partners are key, crucial to be addressed by the Digital Innovation Hub. And then, of course, you need to have the basic funding, and you need to create the access to the basic funding. This is about what I just said, getting a grant from the government. You need a business model for that. And I will later on tell you about that. And then very quickly also set up the initial brand value. What we learn in different other projects today is that it's very often forgotten. But after, because this can take quite some years, after 3 years, you really need to set the brand. You need to distinguish yourself from other elements, other organizations in your ecosystem, and you need to make very clear what you stand for to your customers. That's critical to survive later on. The second step is about the strategy development. This is about further thinking about the business models, developing the research, development, and innovation strategy, boosting, that allows you to boost innovation to the network on the longer term. You need some research and development there. Then the organization and governments needs to become clear, and you need to create your access to market. You need to know what they want. You need to have a very clear view on what the customers are and what segments they are, but also what your competitors are, and to align with your competitors. And then you need to connect to the different funding schemes that can be used to fund the services that you want to provide to your customers. That needs to be made very clear. And then you're entering in a kind of a takeoff cycle. It is about understanding what the technology infrastructures are that you need. You need to boost the consortium expertise to use that technology infrastructures, those technological capacities, capabilities, to translate that into customers' added value. You need to develop tech and business services connecting to the tech infrastructure, and connecting it also to the available institutionalized innovation programs that are out there. Because there's a lot of innovation programs that are out there on the national, regional, and European level, but you need to have very quick access to that. And then it is important to communicate in a very structured way to the customer, to your customer base, and develop the practical operation of the innovation. So those are the three phases. And yes, it's not a sequential approach. It is about feedback loops. Even after you initiate it, you can be thrown back to further explore the concept, further tweak the development of your strategy and making adjustments to the operational methods. But those 4 steps are important because it allows you to look at different people that you can discuss with. It's clear that exploring the concept is dealing with totally different people than making it operational. Making it operational is very much about in-depth discussions with your customers, where the exploring of the concept is also about the financing that you seek with your regional authorities. So these elements are very much there within a kind of a sequential mode, but still during the making it operational, you need to go back to your regional authority to further adjust the concept. And that goes again towards the 4 evolutionary pillars that you need to address. So then in the end, after these 3 phases, you need to develop a business plan. And again, this business plan is about telling the audience, telling your financing institutions about what you want to do. But it's also going to the partners and to discuss with them in a very structured way what exactly the Digital Innovation Hub is about. So the business plan is to create a plan for the future, and it is very helpful to get funding, but it should not be taken as a very static kind of result. You need to be a little bit flexible about it. And it needs to be the kind of a pooling mechanisms for your consortium and the stakeholders to create a very good way, a very good view on what the Digital Innovation Hub is about and how to plan for the future and how to get the funding, what kind of services do you need to develop. So these things are all important. And because this is so important, I would like to go a little bit further in detail on this. So we see 7 elements in this business plan: the connection to society, vision, mission, etc., etc. These are the different elements of the business plan, and I would like to very quickly go through them a little bit. The connection to society is the connection to the economy and what the added value of the Digital Innovation Hub is towards the innovation ecosystem. Why is this important? Here, because it's connected to policymakers. Policymakers want to know what you will bring to society. So that's a very important element to do. It's about looking at the different policy papers that are out there and how can you connect to that. The second part is about a vision and mission and the USPs that you will bring to the scene. You need to have a clear branding, and that's what the vision and mission is about, but you need to also distinguish yourself towards other ones. So that's the market assessment that you need to do. And you need to, the unique selling points are key to the success of the Digital Innovation Hub. And that's something that you need to do in the early phase of the different steps that I just shown. Then it's about the environment. This is about assessing what the environment is, what your partners, customers, governments are, and it is important because it has a strong influence on how you can operate the initiative, how you can operate the Digital Innovation Hub. And well, in the middle, perhaps there's the services that you want to provide, and that services is key because it shows you what the added value is towards your customers. But it also is about how to get paid for those services. Where the more general overview and activities of your innovation hub will need some governmental funding, the services that can be that you must provide can be direct services to direct customers, and they should pay for that. And that's about business models also. And that's something I'm sure Frank will discuss a little bit further in a different webinar. Then there's organization and governance. It's who are you going to work with? How are you going to get involvement from your stakeholders? What kind of memberships are possible together with your customers? That kind of organization and governmental issues need to be addressed in the business plan. It also again goes directly to the business model. And then the funding sources. So if you look at funding, I already said that the services that you can provide will get you some income, but the costs usually are more than the income that the services can provide. So that financial gap needs to be explored, and you need to get in contact with funding sources that can provide both that payment for the services and the payment for the gap. So you need to have you've got a kind of a basic costs that need to be paid. That funding sources also goes to the services that you provide, because for some services, SMEs usually can pay 50%. What about the other 50%? And you can go to governments to have formalized innovation programs. So those are just the programs that are out there, and you can find what kind of funding sources are out there more general to different innovation hubs or different organizations, but you need to compete then, and you need to organize that competition together with your customers to get that kind of funding. And then last but not least, of course, you need to translate it also into an investment plan. The income, the cost, the gap financing, you need to make clear that it's in that business plan. Also looking at the risks and how you want to address those risks. So all integrated into the business plan, which will create a foundation, a shared vision together with your key partners, how the business can be operated. That business plan can be tweaked. Some elements can be just pulled out, and with that you can go to your funding organizations. You can send it in for proposals, but then the business plan will create a kind of a background idea how you can achieve these things, and that will create some more vision, some more structural integrity in your business. And that's all. Those are the different elements that you need to address. So that's, I hope that I've given some kind of a structured view on how you can address that. I'm sure you all will have a lot of questions, in-depth questions about that, but you can also see that I think I'm already through the 30 minutes perhaps. But how you, this takes a lot more information how you can achieve this. Just some final remarks. The development of a digital innovation hub is a very long process. It's the initiation. I just talked about the initiation, but of course, after you initiate it, it's further developed. It's an evolutionary process. You start with some technology service, but you want to also connect to other services to it. It has a lot of different feedback loops. But please think in jumps. Keep the eye on the ball. Create sustainability, and translate that back in the things that you need to do. Because I've seen a lot of things that are just put in, and then after some years, the jump is not looked at, and then you need to you're thrown back. A good example is, for example, the legal status. I've had some experiences with some innovation hubs. They were setting up a kind of a legal status where it's an association, and they were thrown back to really rethink the legal status, because after 2 years they came to the conclusion that VAT was a real problem and they couldn't survive anymore. So you need to think what you want to achieve in about 5 years and then translate it back into the actual operational activities of today. And then again, the business plan is just a tool. Don't be very strict about it. Use it as a mechanism to structure the discussions within your partnership. And there's no black and white. And this is just some guidance, and you need to find your own way, I'm afraid. We can help you with some more practical matters during your process, so you can call us, get in contact with us whenever you feel that you've got some questions that we might be able to answer, but you also need to struggle a lot yourself. Just an epilogue. So those different services I just told you, the community building, you should start with that quite soon, but it is, of course, about strategic RDI that will be uplifted towards creating business for your customers. And the incubator accelerating activities, it's an important service that you can offer, that can come a little bit later. So there you can see the evolutionary thinking. Another element, we were discussing about digital innovation hubs today. So the core, the central element is the digital innovation hub. What we see today is that also the regional digital innovation hub networks are popping up, and so the innovation hub will fade away a little bit, and it will enter into two different entities, where the regional development is taken over some of the activities of the digital innovation hub, creating nodes, digital innovation hub nodes. And that's an important thing to keep in mind. That's perhaps the jump you need to look at. And then you're part of a European project, and I want to also show you this. It is about, the European projects are about connecting regions. So one region can have some questions that another region can fulfill. And you are pivotal in creating the contact to the other region, digital innovation hub regions. And they will be able then to give some infrastructural expertise kind of services back to the region and creating the corridors. And that will lead to some adoption of good sound infrastructures and expertise from other regions. And that's the widening principle that I think the SmartAgriHubs should also be addressing. And it's also, of course, bi-directional. So that's my presentation. I know it's a little bit conceptual. It's just setting the scene. I know that that's the case, but I hope that that this will help you to create a kind of a structural view on how to develop those innovations. So any questions, please?
Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you, first of all, Maurits, for this wonderful presentation. I think it reflects a lot of experience in the Digital Innovation Hub landscape that is continuously emerging. So thank you for that. And indeed, we welcome questions from the audience. I do have a question, Maurits. You mentioned the difference, the changing role within the region. In SmartAgriHubs, we have regional clusters, but these are very large European regions. What do you mean with region when you make that remark?
Yeah, so what is important here is that we see that the idea of Digital Innovation Hub came to place in 2016, 2015, 2016. So some competence centers were just upgraded to Digital Innovation Hubs, more or less. And those Digital Innovation Hubs just connected to the technological services, business services, and ecosystem services. And what we saw is that in regions, the regional authorities are more and more trying to make the connection between the different innovation hubs. They see that a lot of the customers in their regions sometimes need some expertise on this and on robotics, and the other ones on HPC, and the other one on this, and even nanomaterials. And they saw that a fragmented way of approaching this was very inefficient. Mm-hmm. And let me also give you an example of that inefficiency that's very relevant for the European network of SmartAgriHubs. One Digital Innovation Hub having connections to all the other regions. So they are the one in one region. There are 284 regions in Europe. So having all the connections to the 281, it's impossible to do for a single Digital Innovation Hub. And if you could organize it through regional networks, that will provide an enormous economy of scale. You can do it for a SmartAgriHub, but you can also do it for HPC or robotics or whatever.
Yeah.
And that's important.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
There was another question.
Yes, thank you very much for the presentation. And it's a little bit tricky. Digital Innovation Hubs are not in a common language in Germany. And you can't mention Digital Innovation Hubs speaking in the agro sector. And so far, it would be of interest if you say who you are able to do so. As a regional cluster, we are looking at the region, and so we are not able to do or to build up personally the Digital Innovation Hub. Can you provide some case studies, or so to say, this is an example in Belgium or in the Netherlands also?
Yeah, so let me be clear about this. Please, it's semantics. Because if I look at Germany, there's a lot of competence centers, which are basically Digital Innovation Hubs. And that's what's in the name. In the Netherlands, we're calling them field labs. So you can call all the field labs in the Netherlands, which are about 50, I think, they're all Digital Innovation Hubs or innovation hubs, because some of them are not really dealing with digital. So it is about the functions, and it is about creating the ecosystem and the networks. And of course, I can provide you with information about how it's done in different countries. So that's okay. But don't see the problem of semantics, sharing kind of a similar naming as being a barrier for creating what actually is the case, creating business from technologies in your region.
Okay, thanks.
And the Commission knows this.
Yeah, I'd like to add to this. In Germany, indeed, there are competence centers. The name or the term of the Digital Innovation Hub is made to make a distinction with that, to emphasize that the Digital Innovation Hub provides also these ecosystem and business-oriented services, say, on top of the technology-oriented services. It's just a matter of emphasizing those two additional aspects that are needed for successful innovation. Any other questions?
Did this answer your question? Okay, hopefully.
I would also like to ask a question. Thank you very much, Maurits, for your presentation, and I would expect from your experience from Innovation Hubs to to give us an example of a creation of a digital innovation hub, sort of success story or sort of barriers in the development process. I was excited by the slide on feedback loops, and where you discussed about the idea that take off the action and making it operational, and in the end it's startup. But I would like to hear an example on these steps within the loops. Do you have any?
Oh yes. For example, one of the most important success stories, I would say, is well, on the 31st of January. It's a horrible example, perhaps, because it's the MTC in the United Kingdom. So they started with it's our family that went away. But they started with creating a kind of a collaboration between the different in the region of Coventry, the different universities and technology centers, and they started to set something up there together with industry, and they very quickly,
yes.
So they very quickly were able to get some regional funding from the ERDF. But then after some years, they were quite successful. They struggled with enlarging their scope into the full services. So only recently they developed also a program for startup companies. That's something they recently done. So they adjusted, because they saw that the foundation was about offering technology services, but very quickly they also provided some business services to that. But to set up a program on startups, that was something that was done quite later. And that was a feedback loop into the strategy. Because they went to, of course, also their funding agencies and said, look, we want to do something about startups also. We see that those technologies can create startups. They're dealing with real barriers, and we need to set something up there. So the lesson learned is that you need to focus. You need to keep your eye on the ball, develop those services and the connections with the customers very strongly. But you should not forget that in the end, the startup kind of activities also need to be developed. And that already created some kind of capacities, because it's about people. So they hired people to do that. And the connection with the business development and technology provision, the people that were into that were also able to set up startup companies, and they did some. And it expanded to a full-blown program on that.
So you think that the business service element and the startup is a key point in this process?
I think what I do think is that if you start with the technology only.
Sorry, we can't hear you.
So I think that if you start with the technology service only and don't have a clear view on getting the business connection to that, it's a high risk. The problem is that you need to convince your customers that you have added value. And usually the low-hanging fruit is about small and medium enterprises that only need the innovation or the technology services. They know how to grow business. But that's those are very limited number of customers. They can kick off your initiative, but after a year or 2 years, you need fresh customers. And those customers need to be convinced that the services that you developed is really added value. And that there's business-oriented people that need to be involved in making that statement to your customers.
Yes, yes, indeed. Yes, thank you.
I do have another question, Maurits.
Sure.
Listening to the presentation, the evolution and struggles of a digital innovation hub appear to me pretty much as an individual endeavor. In your experience, how can digital innovation hubs benefit from collaborating also during this initial phase?
Oh, let me be clear about that. That's the black and white and the struggling kind of thing. I do think that an orchestrating partner is needed to connect all the dots with the partners in the region. But you can learn a lot from other organizations. So what is important here is that in the SmartAgriHubs network, there's so much expertise and experience already available. I think the collaboration between, well, that's also another project we're doing. We're talking about proto hubs, the hubs that are emerging, and the mature hubs that are really well experienced in these kind of things. You need to create a connection between them, having a kind of a learning mechanism there. Let them visit to your organization. Go there for your visits. Discuss about the actual business models that you can use to provide the services to your customers. They will have, the mature hubs will have some bad experiments and some good experience, and both are important as learning material.
Okay, great. Yeah. So this is exactly.
This is a very strong point. Thank you, Maurits.
Yeah, this is exactly what we're planning for in SmartAgriHubs. So that's a good advice there.
And a kind of a buddy mechanism would be interesting. Having buddies. So mature hub, proto hub buddies.
Yeah.
That would be interesting.
Yeah. So related to the maturity model, we're looking into setting up a friendly peer reviewing mechanism to facilitate exactly what you are describing.
That's important also, peer reviewing. But what is important also, so you can use the business plan as a kind of a pooling mechanism towards those discussions. What I see very often is that the examples from other ones are not examples anymore, but just more copying mechanisms. That's not going to be the case. It's always going to be an example here, an example there, and try to uplift it to a structured view on the development of the innovation hub. And then if you just have one example of how things went right, that will never lead to a full-grown business plan and business concept for a new digital innovation hub. Then you need so much more information in a structured way.
Yes, this also is related to the other question I have in mind, because in the way I see things in SmartAgriHubs, different digital innovation hubs have different origins. So one comes from a competence center or a university, the other one is more originating from, say, regional government. and others are, say, agro native, and others are more ICT native, entering into agro. So different starting points. What you explained today has a manufacturing origin. What do you think would be the main differences between those different points of origin and versus the manufacturing origin of the concept?
Yeah, it is of course about the different missions of the partners. The problem with these digital innovation hubs, it should be a multi-actor endeavor, so to say. And what you see, if you start from a university that you or an RTO, that university or RTO usually has a technology focus. The mission of that kind of organizations is about bringing technologies to market. So it will be a very strong development of push towards technology push, so to say. If you start from it with it from an industry association kind of view, so clusters can be are usually also there. It's a very much market pull, but they will be very focused on dealing it with for specific customers, and they will have a hard time also creating it more in a more structural way. So creating structures where those universities and RTOs are collaborating. A regional perspective, I can see from some experience that starting from a regional authority, it takes a lot more time because it's politics then, and politics is not easy to get, and to make the steps. Yeah. So that's going to be a little bit of a struggle. That's why you need a multi-actor organization. I would say very quickly get in contact with other key partners from different perspectives and try to set up a kind of a task force.
Okay.
Maybe I can add a little bit here.
We can't hear you.
Christina here. Maybe I can add a little bit to what Maurits is saying. Definitely the focus of a manufacturing digital innovation hub and the SmartAgriHub might be different in the sense of the sector that they are addressing, but the steps to set them up and the challenges that they deal with are pretty similar. So for an example, a digital innovation hub would have to connect the technology providers such as robotics and ICT providers to the small and medium enterprise in manufacturing. In AgriHubs, you would have the digital innovation hub, which has to connect the ICT providers, for example, with the farmers. In both cases, you need to speak both languages and to be able to have partners that understand both sides and can address that. And that's why it's a multi-partner organization. So yes, the topic might be a little bit different, but the concept behind it is pretty much the same.
And also the challenges are more or less the same. But the language and the business models and the added value and the technologies are perhaps a little bit different. But it's the steps to go through the motions is more or less the same.
Okay. Thank you. With an eye on the time, I think we can finish off with one more question, if there is any.
Can you share with us the presentation, Frank and Maurits?
Of course. Of course.
Thank you.
Yes.
And if you have other questions also, because again, I know that this is a kind of a conceptual view, and but if you want to know a lot more details, you can always get in contact with me. I've got this situation, I'm dealing with these problems, the people are not coming together, how can we deal with it? Then I can provide you with some information on that. I'm happy to do that.
Yes, thank you. Because in the agri sector, the concept of digital innovation hub is rather recent.
Yeah.
Yes.
Compared with manufacturers. So it's after 2017, I think, that the concept.
Yeah, but please realize that in manufacturing.
Sorry?
In manufacturing, it was only coined in 2016. So the whole concept of digital innovation hub is very young. So you can catch up quite quickly.
Yeah. Obviously, I think, and one of the things I learned from this webinar, Maurits, was your comments about the regional development and the interlinking between the regions, and basically because of the strong ambitions that we have as SmartAgriHubs, pan-European with a target of 400 digital innovation hubs, we immediately set out to create, say, larger European regions. Hubert is very much aware of that, and as are the people from CAP there in the call, that this is a huge coordination task within those larger regions that we have identified within SmartAgriHubs. But this is actually also part of the example that SmartAgriHubs is providing to other initiatives as well.
Yeah. And I see one of the major challenges for this is how to create not 400 loose shotgun kind of activities, but how to create a network where organizations are really learning from each other, helping each other. And one perhaps last anecdote for that. Digital innovation hubs all want to sell their services to other organizations or other innovation hubs in other regions, but they hardly want to import them. And if that's the case, no export will also take place. Because if there's only supply and no demand, then, well, collaboration is out of the question, of course. And I think SmartAgriHubs needs to find ways how that mutual benefits, that win-win situation between one digital innovation hub and another innovation hub on both sides can be explored. And some new business models, Frank, are needed for that.
Yeah. All right. Now it's time to close. Again, thank you very much, Maurits, but also thank you very much to the audience for listening and also for interacting with us. This webinar will be also positioned on the SmartAgriHubs portal, and as mentioned in the introduction of this webinar, there will be more webinars upcoming, for instance, on farmer-centric innovation and digital innovation hub governance. All right, thank you very much. Work a little bit and then enjoy the weekend.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, likewise.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye.